Just seen some of the best rowers in the world in activity during the Lucerne Regatta 1985. The film was taken with a high-speed camera by Dominic Keller, and it's a part of FISA's development program. Today we will not talk about rowing technique. We will talk about the physiological aspects of rowing, and we have with us today a young American coach, Matt Smith from California. Matt, what's your thought when you see these top athletes compete over 2,000 meters?
Yes, very impressive rowing and strong physical athletes. I should hope to coach athletes at that level someday. However, right now in the universities in the United States, I'm coaching athletes who are just in their first years of rowing. And I'd like to know, to develop my training, an understanding of the body systems in developing that training.
Matt, I think you are in good company with this request. Most coaches, they like to know how to create the most proper training program for their athletes. We have to know what kind of sport do we have. Is it a power sport? Is it an endurance sport? We must know the work requirement in our sport. And the best way to analyze it is, of course, to have a look at the race. As we have seen during this race, we need endurance. The time for a good aid can be from about 5:30, but average 6 to 8 minutes, and we repeat it 220 to 260 strokes. It means we need what we call endurance. Endurance means aerobic capacity. And if I use this word aerobic capacity, Matt, do you understand what I mean?
Well, isn't that the system, as a car uses gasoline for fuel, the body uses oxygen as its fuel?
That's right, and we have another capacity as well. We can use what we call anaerobic capacity. If the aerobic capacity is capacity produced with air, with oxygen, the anaerobic capacity is produced without air. But we will in this lesson concentrate on the aerobic capacity, because that covers 70 to 80% of the capacity we need during a race. And we will show an illustration who give you a picture of the oxygen transport system. As we can see here, the oxygen transport system operates in this way. We breathe in air with oxygen into the lungs. Due to the red blood cells, or what we call hemoglobin, oxygen will be adapted into the blood transport system, go into the heart, here described as a pump. In fact, the heart is a muscle, it is a pump. They pump blood around in the body, and here it is transported around in the body and out to the working muscles, where the oxygen is accepted in the muscle cells and used as fuel for the produced energy, and then the blood is going relatively empty back and is filled up again from the beginning. This is a simple explanation how it works. This was a very simple explanation, but we can take another illustration and show more in detail how the oxygen is adapted in the body. This picture shows more or less what we have seen in illustration number 1, but we can describe it a bit more in detail. We need a high level of hemoglobin to be able to adapt the oxygen from the lungs. And of course, here on the heart itself, it is the size and the strength of the heart muscle who will decide how much blood and how much oxygen we can pump out in the system. And here in the muscle mass, we have several limitations for how much oxygen we can adapt. It's some strange names here like capillary density, enzyme activity, mitochondrial mass. We will not go into details about these things in this lesson, but just explain for you that in the muscle itself is several factors who must be improved to be able to adapt and utilize oxygen on a high level. Even if we have this part very well trained, it will still be oxygen going back in the system. We cannot use everything who are pumped around in the body. As you have seen, Matt, it's several factors involved in the oxygen transport system. And it's many factors you have to think about when you create a training program for your athletes. Do you get a picture of how these things work?
Yes, on a basic level, but how can we know that this and measure this level of oxygen?
Yeah, what we are talking about here, it is in fact the performance level. And the best way, of course, to control such a thing is to control the progress of your athletes. They go faster. In land training, they will run faster, and you will see that the total capacity will improve with correct training. But of course, we have several systems to control it in the laboratory. And I will show an illustration who gives us an overall picture of how these things work. Here we have created a system for the rover where we collect his used air here. We have a tube from this bag and up to a mask. The mask gives him the possibility to breathe in fresh air, but all the air he blows out, we will collect it in this bag. We know that in the air you breathe in, we have around 21% of oxygen. And if we take this bag to the laboratory and analyze it for oxygen, we will find a difference between these 21% and what we have in the bag. This difference is the oxygen you have used. It means it gives you the oxygen uptake. In rowing, we normally operate with liters a minute. A top rower, international level, should be able to take up around 6 liters, a lightweight rower around 5, and women around 4.5 liters. In other sports and in general terms, we very often talk about the maximum oxygen uptake, and we divide it with body weight. In that case, we get what we call aerobic power. Aerobic power, it's milliliter for kilo body weight a minute. And for these people here, it ranges from 20 to 90, and these 20, it's for untrained people, and the 90 milliliter for top-trained endurance athletes. In rowing, we will operate between 65 and 70 milliliter. Lightweight rowers, 70, 72 kilo, will be around 70 milliliter, and the more heavy people will be from 65 to 70 milliliter. This was a very simple explanation about the system and how we can control it. Of course, we can also take such a test in a laboratory with more scientific instruments, more sophisticated instruments, and we will show you what we can do in a laboratory when we test rowers. Matt, you have seen this test in the laboratory, and this is the way we can use to find each athlete's work capacity profile.
But Thor, is it necessary to have a laboratory to produce results?
Well, Matt, it's also a very unpolite question. Of course, we don't need a laboratory to create top rowers. But we need a laboratory to get knowledge about our sport. And we need also the laboratory to find out how different training models can influence the progress of our athletes. But I think in the whole world we have perhaps 8 or 10 places where our sport can be studied in details. And of course these studies is to help for all of us. As now in this program we can explain for you what's going on. But it is correct to put your finger on this point. Laboratory is a scientific part of our sport, and it's not necessary in each club to create top rowers.
Well, I'm glad to hear that I don't have to go out and buy a laboratory. My university president will be happy to hear that. However, in the oxygen system, what are the limiting factors in training my athletes?
We talked about the lungs as the first part, and for normal people, the lungs, it's not a limiting factor. We have seen during a test that most athletes, they can breathe in 1 minute 160, 70 to 200 liters and more. And if we know that we have 21% of oxygen in the air, it means that in 1 minute you have around 40 liters in your lung. So it means the lung cannot be a limiting factor. The hemoglobin in the blood is of course a certain kind of limiting factor if the level is too low. But the first real part who can make a stop in the progress, it is the heart. And I have another illustration who can explain that better. As we mentioned, the heart is the first limiting factor. And we will not talk too much about the things up here, but we will concentrate on the numbers down here. This is all about the stroke volume. And if we say that your athletes have a maximum heart rate of 200 during maximum work, and the size of the heart is 110 milliliter, it means that the heart can pump in one stroke 110 milliliter. It means that with 200 heart rates and the volume of 110 milliliters, around in your body you will be able to pump 22 liters a minute of blood. If we calculate your hemoglobin level to 15 gram for 100 milliliter of blood, we know that you are able to transport 4.4 liters of oxygen in 1 minute around in your body. And of course, if you're able to transport these things here, it means that you are not able to utilize it. You cannot utilize 100%. So we can see here, with such a heart, you cannot reach any international level for your athletes. If we go up here and train the heart up so the stroke volume can be 160 milliliter, and we still calculate with 200 in heart rate, you will pump 32 liters of blood around in your body, and in that case, with the same hemoglobin level, you will be able to pump 6.4 liters of oxygen. In this case, you will probably be able to utilize around 5 liters, and that's where we can see most of the lightweights. If we go up here to a heart who can pump 200 milliliter, we are up in 40 liter and 8 liter of oxygen. And this is the area where you will find the top athletes. So it means the limiting factor number 1 is the heart's pump capacity.
Well, I can see that by training we can increase the amount of blood that we pump to the body but what happens once we've pumped it out into the body?
Yeah, the pump it is one problem, but of course to utilize it is another thing. And as we have seen before in one of the illustrations, we need in the peripheral part, in the muscle cells, we have to train the muscle cells to be able to utilize the oxygen. And there we are into this, what we talked about, this strange word, capillarization, mitochondria, and this different kind of capacity. We have to improve the training. So the main point first is the heart pump capacity, and the second, it is to train the peripheral part to adapt oxygen. But we have from United States a study who show how much top rowers can utilize other capacity. And this is a study from Mikkelsen and Hagemann from 1980, where they tested the national or the US Olympic rowing team. We will not go into all these numbers here, but we will jump direct to the conclusion. And their conclusion is in one way simple. They said an average world-class oarsman generates 72% of his total power output by utilizing 83% of his aerobic capacity. And if we go back to these other numbers we have seen with 8 liters of oxygen transportation, and we say 83% of this, it means 6.5 liters of oxygen should be able, the oarsman should be able to have as a maximum uptake. And that is also the numbers we know from the top rowers in the world.
Okay, I understand better how the body utilizes the blood that we pump. But has it been proven that better oxygen utilization capacity produces results?
Yeah, that's right. So we can see it, of course, in the laboratory again, that it's a very close connection between oxygen uptake and the results. But as long as we don't take the competition in the laboratory, we have to look into the races itself. And it has been made studies from, for instance, Dr. Nilsen in Denmark, who made a nice study for some years ago about a European championship. The Dr. Secker's study was made on the results in the European Championship 1971. It is 15 years ago, but we do not believe that this tendency has changed. We can see here that the winners here on this line, they have a higher oxygen uptake than people coming down here to the small final and also lower than the small final. So we can conclude that it is absolutely confirmed that a high maximum oxygen uptake is an important factor of the final results.
Okay, I buy the fact that oxygen plays a major role in producing results, but could you relate all this that we've learned to training for me?
Yeah, we have specific training to train the oxygen transport system. Of course, we have a different spectrum of training models, but we have two main factors you must look into when you create training programs for your athletes. These two main training sessions means interval training and long distance training. Beside this training, you have, of course, technical training, you can have distance training, and training where you teach your rowers to adapt the technique to speed. But if we talk about the plain physiological side and how to train the peripheral part of the body to adapt oxygen, as well as to train the heart, we have to look into these two main training ideas. If we look for long distance training first, the long distance training will increase all these strange numbers or the strange names I used before, capillary density, enzyme activity, number of of power plants or mitochondria, and increased oxidative capacity. It means that with long-distance training, we increase the muscle cells' possibility and ability to utilize oxygen for energy. If we go on the other side here for the interval training, that will be the main purpose, to enlarge and strengthen the heart itself. It means to give a higher stroke volume. Both training has a certain influence on the other factors. It means long-distance training will also have an influence on the heart, as well as interval training will have influence on the peripheral part of the body. But if you want to train specific, the pump capacity, you go with interval training. If you want to train specific on the muscle cells, you go with long-distance training with relatively low intensity. So keep in your mind, when you create the program, you need to put these two elements into the total system.
And what elements would you weigh as far as the time spent on training either of these two methods?
You mean how much time you should give for this kind of training in your program? Mm-hmm. It depends absolutely on the level of your team. First of all, they must learn the rowing technique. They must learn how to handle and how to, let's call it, to utilize their capacity over in boat speed. So in the beginning, I think, first of all, they have to handle the boat and the material, and you better and better they are technically, the more time you can put into this physiological training. We have now talked about some of the main factors in the physiological background. But you as a coach must remember that rowing is a complete sport, and we have to cover all aspects of rowing: technique, land preparation, race training, and many, many other aspects. We will not stress this point now, but in other lessons we will also go through these aspects of rowing.
Hablaremos de la